Teaching this morning, and I'm going to try to let it be quick. I'm going to try to let it be quick and then round up. Oh, thank you, Madam Akuda. You see, I can always count on Madam Akudo. If nobody else logs in, if nobody else shows up for me, I know she will. So thank you very much. But I encourage others to log in, and let me know if you can hear me fine. Let me know if everything is okay with the audio. Thank you, Shade. You know what? I can't even proceed much further before giving appreciation to Shadi, because when I tell you that even live streaming this was a whole warfare, it was a whole warfare. But thanks to Shadi, because at some point I started to question my engineering degree, but thanks to Shadi and her husband, the real engineer, who jumped in and helped out, and so here we are, we're streaming, and by the grace of God, it shall be permanent. Because when we did it the first time, it was like the enemy was like, no, you guys are not taking over the media space. But here we are, it shall be permanent. We're going to continue to stream so that more people can log on and be blessed by the word of God, right? So thank you to those who are logging in. I can see you, Amaria. I can see everyone here. So yes, let's get into the teaching, because my goal is to be able to round this up by I think 10 o'clock. Initially, I was going to teach till 9:30, but I think it's going to go on till 10 now. So again, if you guys need to say anything to me, you will have to put it in the chat, because I'm not listening to the audio on Teams. So if you need to interact, get on YouTube. I can see the chat on YouTube, but I'm not going to be able to hear you all if you're talking to me from Teams, right? So let's pray and get into the message for today. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for yet another opportunity to gather before you. We thank you for your word that has come to your people. We thank you for this is the set time that you're looking to do a lot in the lives of your people, that you're looking to break off the influence and the hold of the enemy over the lives of your people. Lord, I ask that even as the words come out today from me, that you cause my vessel to disappear into the background, and you let just your voice be projected to your people. Let the people who hear the words today hear the Spirit of God and hear the life-giving component of that Spirit. Let it sit in their spirit and let it make a difference in their life, and let it make a change in their lives. I yield my vessel to you. I ask that you take control, have your way. Let the people hear you and not me, in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay. So let's see, where do we start? Okay. So like I said, I think that this message was picked specifically for this time because of a few things that are going on in the spirit. And so, as you know, like in this house, we definitely lean on getting direction from God and just, moving by his spirit. Okay. So we try to spend enough time understanding what God is doing in the season, what God is doing in the moment. So we know where we need to be, how we need to position ourselves. And so when this theme came up, I just knew that it was just something that had to be addressed. So at the end of my session, I'm hoping that we can even just take a minute to take a prayer, because a short while ago I sensed that the enemy was doing something, and it's important that we address it, and it's important that people understand what that is and how to protect themselves from it. So let's begin here. So here's the thing, is that the Spirit of God is doing something in the life of a believer, right? There are many times that the Spirit of God will show up in the life of a believer to execute certain operations, right? Sometimes it might be the operation of deliverance. Other times it might be the operation of even bringing them into the body, bringing them into the knowledge and the awareness of God. There are many times that the enemy will know what's going on in the lives of the believer, and step into that picture in order to put a mark on that story. And so one of the things that I've picked up very loudly in the spirit in recent times is that, when God is doing something in the life of a person, initially, it wouldn't seem like there's any pushback. It wouldn't seem like it's raising any kind of alarms or any dust in the spirit. And so for the most part, God is doing that work in your life, it'll be happening very smoothly. It'll be happening very fine. So maybe you're, trying to stand against, demonic altars in your family. Maybe you're trying to stand against the opposition of the enemy. Maybe you're trying to just, take your place and, ensure that your life is lived according to what God has said, not what the enemy would rather your life look like, right? And so you'll be in that process. You'll be in that process where God is executing, massive deliverance in your family, where God is executing, just huge things in your life. And so the enemy realizes what is going on, and that's when he strikes. The reason why this thing came up for me was that I have not just seen this thing in scripture, but I have seen this thing happen in the lives of wonderful, beautiful people over and over. And it caused me to sit down and start asking God real questions. And I hope it's something that we do a lot. I know many of us grew up with the whole you do not question God, but you have to ask God questions. He expects you to ask him certain questions, right? And we're not questioning from the standpoint of, why would you, how dare you? No, that's not it. But we ask these questions so that we can have knowledge, right? The Bible says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. So for that reason, you can tell that God is interested in you garnering knowledge. It's never going to be a situation where God is like, oh, why would you try to know this? Why would you try to know that? God is interested in you seeking that knowledge. So I started to ask God that question. I said, and I'll describe the pattern. Maybe you might identify this thing in your life. But so I will just describe what I noticed. What I noticed was that when people are in this process of breaking out of a pattern, when people are in this process of breaking out of a bad season, when people are out of this in this process of breaking out of like captivity, if you will, it'll initially go smoothly. It'll start to run fine. And, it's not like it's going to be like a perfect, situation all the way, right? Like they would run into bumps here and there. But for the most part, it's progressing. In a sense, they can see their way out. And so what happens is eventually the enemy realizes that, okay, this is not a joke. Because it's not going to be the first time people try to free themselves from the grasp of the enemy, right? So the enemy is used to seeing it. People like, oh, I don't like this, I want to go. But then after 2 seconds, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to make my bed here because, where else am I going to go, right? And so the enemy sees that, you know what, this person actually means business. This person is really going to finally break out of this hold. This person is really going to finally break out of this pattern. And so I have to do something about it. At that point in time, the enemy begins to look around. Because more than likely, the reason you are making that much progress, the reason that what's going on in your life is advancing is because there is someone or there are people that God has planted in your life in that season who are playing an instrumental part in your journey. I hope you're following me. There are people in your life that God has brought into your life who are playing an instrumental part of your journey. They might have different titles, however you choose to name them. They might have a title of friend. They might have a title of spiritual mentor. They might have to have a title of spiritual father, covering, whatever you want to call them. But these people show up in your life and they are playing a very instrumental part in your deliverance. Now, you may not even realize it, but one person who's never caught unawares is the enemy. So he knows it. So you don't know that that's what's going on, but the enemy knows it. And so when he realizes that this is what is going on and you're really about to break out, you're really about to break free, he starts to look around. He starts to sniff the area. Who just came into this person's life? Who is in this person's life that is causing this kind of shift? So he's seen that some of the old tricks he used to try, they don't have any effect anymore. The intimidation tactics he used to use on you, they don't have that much of an effect anymore. So he starts to look around. Who is it in this person's life that is contributing to this reality? And once he can identify that person, or even if there are people, once he can just identify people who have any part to play in this thing that's going on in your life, the next thing he starts to do is that he begins to manipulate that relationship. He begins to manipulate that relationship. And I've shared this in the King's Arrow group, and I'm sharing it here because, like I said, it is a loud alarm in the spirit that someone needs to take note of. It might be something you need to know right this moment. It might be something you need to know in the next few weeks or months of your life. But understand that if you're taking a spiritual journey out of captivity into your identity and the reality of what God has, spoken about you, the enemy is not sitting down watching it happen. He's not giving you to-go boxes. He's not giving you souvenirs and be like, yeah, it was nice while it lasted. No, that's not happening. So he starts to look around. Who is in the picture that is, impacting this person in this way? Who is it that is having a part in this story that is causing my grasp to be loosened over this person? Then he starts to manipulate that relationship. And there are many ways that this can show up, right? And for the undiscerning, it can become a time when, instead of understanding what's going on in the spirit and responding accordingly, you begin to respond in the flesh. For a lot of us, for a lot of people, you begin to respond in the flesh. And that might look like offense. That might look like pride. That might look like fear. That might look like insecurities. Different things come up, but it starts to muddy the waters of that relationship. It's kind of like scrambling the communication line. So it's like you're doing something here, they're doing something, and somehow it's like you guys are not connecting. And next thing, that relationship is really being threatened. Very soon, it's very possible that if that path continues, if that progression continues, there's not going to be a relationship that you can refer to. It has happened many times, and I not saying this, in a way to say, oh, this is what your life's going to look like, but the enemy will continue to do it. Maybe not in your life, but he'll find someone else where he can take this strategy too. It's always going to be the way that the enemy operates, because once it's not you that this energy is coming from, he'll find, whoever that person is, and then he'll attack. Now, the question is why? And this was where God started to just break things down for me and helped me understand what's going on. Because many times in the life of a believer, the enemy cannot strike you just like that. Many times, the enemy cannot strike you just like that. In order for the enemy to strike you, many times he has to go and find your hedge, and he attacks that hedge. And what many people do not understand is that the hedge around their lives is literally one human being, sometimes two, sometimes four. Many times we do not realize that the hedge around our lives is an actual human being. So we think that the hedge might be like this system or maybe this practice that we're doing or whatever. And don't get me wrong, some of those practices contribute to the hedge. But many times the hedge around your life is in the form of a human being. That's why the enemy starts looking around to see who came into your picture, who stepped into your story and is tampering with something he's working on. Human beings are hedges for us. We just don't know it. Many times we don't honor the position of people in our lives. We don't see them the way that we should. And because of that, we cannot fully gain what we should from them. Many times, human beings are the hedge in your life, around your life. So you look even in your life today, starting with your parents. We may not like our parents. Maybe we didn't like how they, spanked us when we were kids. Maybe we didn't like how they didn't let us take an extra snack, to school when we were kids. Different things. Maybe it's even deeper than that. Now, I'm not talking about parents that are just, they've surrendered themselves to the enemy, right? I'm talking about actual parents who maybe their crime was that they didn't let you go to parties. Maybe they didn't let you mix with certain kinds of people. They didn't let you experiment with alcohol, like those kinds of things, right? So there are people who have those kinds of, that's their beef with their parents. But the thing is that those parents serve as a hedge. You don't realize it, but that's what they are. There are other family members that serve as a hedge. Remember the story of Abraham and Lot in the Bible? That was a clear hedge that was set around Lot's life. But we don't discern this thing many times. We don't know it. The hedge may be your husband. It may be an uncle. It may be a mother, So you hear about people who you're like, somebody must have been praying for you as a child, right? When we see the way that life turns out, maybe when they are older. So we knew them as like the playboy, the, whatever we want to, call them, right? We knew them as this many things. But down the line, now they're living a completely different life. And it's like, wow, somebody must have been praying for you, right? These are the systems that God puts in a person's life. They are a hedge. And if we don't know it, we would not know how to preserve that hedge. Earlier on the Mount Up session, I was just given a description of what the hedge is. And the hedge is, simply put, it's a fence. It's a system of fencing in something, a region, a person, resources, right? That is what a hedge is. You use that as a system to fence something in, to set a boundary in place. If you don't remember much when we're done with this call, I want you to remember this today. Many times the hedge that God puts over your life is a human being. It'll take you applying the wisdom of God and asking God in the place of prayer to open your eyes to see who people are for who they really are. It'll take you asking God to open your eyes to see who these people are for real. If not, we walk around thinking, oh, that's just my bestie. That's just my roommate. That's just my sister. That's just my colleague. But I tell you that many times the hedge around your life that has been protecting you and keeping you and just making sure that the enemy could not, tamper with your life was a human being. Maybe it's even your pastor in your local church, right? That's who that hedge is. But because we don't know this, we approach some of these relationships with laxity. We approach it very wrongly. So if we wanted to even take a minute to look at maybe how this played out, you take a look at someone like Lot, right? Lot is a prime example of this. Because many times familiarity will cause you to lose your hedge without you knowing, because you didn't even know the word that your hedge in the first place. Whether Lot knew this or not, I don't even know. But Abraham was literally that man's hedge. From the time they left their hometown to where they settled, Abraham was that man's hedge. Abraham was the system God put in place for Lot. Because remember, Lot had even lost his own father at a very early age anyway. And so Abraham was that hedge system that God put around Lot. However, down the line, Lot has blown. Lot blows now, right? He has blown, he's a big guy, and so he cannot see that Abraham was his hedge. So to Lot, Abraham is his uncle. If he's even going to elevate Abraham a little more, Abraham is his colleague, right? We're both rearing animals. We both do this. When you don't know who people are in your life, you misuse them. And I don't mean misuse from a standpoint of like, oh, you treat them poorly. No, you don't leverage what they represent in your life. So Lot sees Abraham as his uncle. And then at some point, it's like he's a colleague. And so instead of, fighting to secure that relationship, he's just like, well, at the end of the day, you have animals, I have animals, So he sees that there's this issue that keeps coming up between his herdsmen and Abraham's herdsmen. Wisdom would have demanded that he put that relationship in context and addressed that situation, but he did not. He allowed that situation fester. He allowed that situation linger. I can only imagine how many times Abraham had to call family meeting so that they could, discuss what has happened and, figure it out and just, find a way to come to an agreement and then move on, only to count time before the next fight. This man couldn't understand who Abraham was in his life. So it's like, he's just my uncle, he's just that guy who, I go to him every now and then, but I'm a grown man now, so I don't really need that level of like oversight. Like, I'm my own person. I got this, right? So when you don't know who these people are, that's the same kind of behavior that you take. So you see them and you just harmonize them. You're just like, whatever, like, oh, I know him, And I was sharing on the King's Hour, I think it was the last Bible study, right? I was saying how there's certain people I have as a friend. Actually, specifically one person I have as a friend. I mean, in his mind, we're friends. I know he's way more than a friend to me. I cannot approach our relationship as friendship. I understand that even though we laugh and this and all of that, and we think I know for a fact that we are beyond friends. So there's that level of honor that I accord to him simply because of that. Because it is my responsibility to put that relationship in context by reason of recognizing that person represents a system of a hedging around you. So what Satan then does is that idea that, what? I maybe cannot stop this person from making attempts to escape captivity. Maybe I cannot stop this person from seeking a way out of this, bondage that their entire family is in. But what I can do is that I can tamper with that relationship. I can mess with that friendship. I can break that hedge. So the game plan is that if I can just draw them out of that hedge, then I can get at them. Then I can hit them to the max. Now I'm teaching this obviously based on like this is the truth in the word, right? But I'm hoping that you understand that this is something that really happens. I've seen this thing happen multiple times. That's why I'm going on about it. I've seen it happen multiple times. So a person, and I'm talking about somebody who's been in a process for a long time. So this is not even somebody who just realized they needed to walk out of captivity yesterday. This is somebody who realized that they needed to walk out of captivity, and it's been months of them just making progress one step at a time, only to get to a critical point in that journey out of that system of bondage, and boom, the enemy messes with that relationship. And because they can't discern it, they respond in offense and throw themselves out of that hedge. They throw themselves out of that system of covering, and then they are free for all for the enemy at that point. Because I tell you this, that until the enemy can get that hedge out, many times he cannot touch you. That's the truth. So let's take a look at Bible. Victor, I'm hoping you can put scriptures here. So if you look at Ecclesiastes 10, I'm going to just run through a couple of scriptures, right? And then we'll get into some of the other pieces that I want us to get before it's 10 o'clock. You see in Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 8, it says, he that digs the pit shall fall therein. But then it says, he that breaketh the hedge, the serpent will bite. He that breaketh the hedge, the serpent will bite. Okay? So the serpent is not inexistent. The serpent did not suddenly become weak. But the reality is that there is a hedge around that person that makes the serpent, for lack of a better word, impotent in that person's matter. So as long as that hedge is in place, the serpent can keep circling the building, but he can't do anything to that person. So that's why the scripture says, he that breaketh the hedge, that's when the serpent can bite. The enemy has to be able to mess with your hedge system in order to get at you many times. But many times we do not realize it. If you take a look at the story of Job, that's literally what happened there. So you look at Job chapter 1, I think it might be from verse 7 or so. If you look, well, basically it starts from verse 1 and kind of all the way down. But you find that Job was in this situation where he was maximally protected, I tell you, right? And then we see in Job chapter 1, there's this very interesting conversation that goes on between God and the serpents. And I have a question when I finish reading this portion of scripture, because I'm really curious about this. Now, there are many things that can serve as a hedge, right? But I'm focusing on the hedge that is a human being in your life. So from verse 7, it says, and the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, listen, it said, doth Job fear God for naught? Has not thou made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? So Satan knew that it's not just about that, like, oh, Job is such a great guy and all that. He said it's because there is a hedge around him. And so for Satan to be able to step into that picture, to have any hand inside that matter, he said, put forth now, put forth thine hand now and touch all that he had, right? And he will curse thee to. Basically what he's saying is, take the hedge around him. Take it off. Take the hedge that's around him off and see if he will not respond differently. That's what Satan was asking. And so it was in that moment that the decision was made, like, you know what, fine, because I trust Job, right? So it's like, you go do what you need to do, but I know Job, and I know Job is good. So you do what you have to do, right? And God said, just don't touch his life. What I'm trying to point out to you here is that hedge is a system that God puts in place. And if you don't respect that hedge, if you don't realize it, if you don't acknowledge it, you will live a life where God will put you in a hedge, you break it. You move again, you break it. So that's how you see many people, operate. So you have moved from one person to another, because you can't find where you can just be like, you know what? Let me stay here and let me learn what I need to learn in this season of my life. If you don't know that, then that's the position that you have, right? And I'm sure we're all saying, well, we're talking about intercession. We'll get there. So just hang on. We'll get there. So that hedge system is one that God puts in place to protect people, to preserve them, and to save them. Now, I want to show you where intercession comes into play. Because I know for the last few minutes, we've been talking more about the responsibility of the person who needs a hedge and all of that, the person who needs covering, the person who needs to be protected and all of that. But I'm going to show you the other side of this. Because it's when you understand the full scope, maybe you have to understand it, right? Because maybe you didn't understand, why you had to be doing all of this, why you had to intercede and all of that. So maybe when we now start to look at it properly, you'll understand. There are many other examples in the Bible of a situation of somebody tampering with a hedge and next thing the serpent biting them. Too many instances, right? If I don't even have to pick real life examples, even though I could, if I had to. But I've seen it over and over, and it weighed heavy on my heart. That's why we're addressing it today. So I want us to look at something here, because this has to be our level of understanding with these things, so that we understand what our own work is. So if we can open Luke chapter 22 and verse 31, I want to point something out to us, because I think this hints a picture of what it looks like and what our response is when this kind of situation comes up. Why are we looking at this in this setting? Not necessarily because you're the one who, is supposed to be in a hedge and the enemy is, trying to draw you out of your hedge or whatever. I'm sharing this today because the theme is called to intercede, right? Or called to intercession, one of the two. And this portion of scripture properly captures what your responsibility then is. So if you want to, okay, it's on the screen, I believe. Okay. So Luke 22 and 31, this is a discussion that's, is going on between Jesus and Peter. And he says, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. This is just where I want us to focus for a quick minute, because there are a couple of things I want to point out. Do you understand that this is what the enemy does for people? Literally looking for who he can sift as wheat. Many of us don't realize it, so we think that we have arrived and all of that. And he said, you are out here flexing your shoulder. You are out here doing, I'm Jesus's right-hand guy. But you don't understand that the enemy is looking to sift you as wheat. That's what he looks to do for many people who are, navigating their way out of bad situations, out of bondage. Like I said, you get very close to your breakthrough, he's looking for how to sift you as wheat. So look at a different translation. I love the other translations, like New King James. It says, Satan has asked for you. Another translation, this is New American Standard Bible, it says, Satan has demanded. I hope you can see what I'm trying to point out here. It said, Satan has asked for you. Satan has desired. He has demanded. The different translations use those different terminologies. I love Amplified. Oh, thank you, Jesus. I love Amplified. Amplified says Satan has demanded permission. Do you understand that? Satan has demanded permission. So basically what I've been trying to explain to you earlier is that many times he cannot strike you until he can break your hedge. But you see what is going on here, and what I want us to take in mind, or rather keep in mind and take away from this, is that if you find yourself in that position where you are the hedge, this is what's going on. And for many of us, we are literally the hedge in our families. We are the hedge in our families. We are the hedge in our homes. We are the hedge in many of the relationships that we have with people who maybe are friends, maybe siblings, I don't know, mentor-mentee type relationships. We are the hedge. We are the hedge. Especially here as marketplace ministers, we are the hedge. You don't realize this, then you lose too many people to the enemy. You don't realize it, you lose too many people. Because look at what it's saying in Luke chapter 22 and verse 31. It says, Satan has demanded. Satan asked permission. It's literally what happened with Job. Satan couldn't just step in and be like, I'm going to snatch you out. He has to ask permission. He has to ask permission. And the response of Jesus in the next verse is what strikes me. And that's what brings us into, what we need to take away from the teaching today. It says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked, Satan has demanded for you so that he may sift you as wheat. And then verse 32 shows you the response that Jesus has for this situation. It says, but I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. I'm hoping we're following the train of what's going on here. So someone asks a question, and then we have a response. So it's basically a Q&A session going on right now. So the enemy has asked to sift you as wheat. This is a question that is not a yes or no situation. It is a question that requires an answer. And the answer is intercession. That's all it is. The answer is intercession. Because do you understand the kind of things that Peter and even the other disciples had to deal with walking with Jesus? These are people that Jesus was pulling out of their lives, pulling out of their norm, pulling out of their tradition, pulling out of the system, trying to bring them into this new dispensation, into the kingdom. And so there was ample room for offense. Too many, I tell you. Too many options of offense. Too many reasons to be offended. And Jesus made it clear to Peter. I said, Satan has asked for you to sift you as wheat. He has asked for you. So understand that when you function in the position of a hedge, there are things that this enemy will begin to do that are pretty much a request system. That's why I said earlier, you find those kinds of situations. It's the very people that you're supposed to be covering in prayer that begin to upset you. It's the very people that you're supposed to be covering that begin to act out. But the thing is that you may not realize what's going on. Or rather, they may not realize what's going on. Because if they did, they would likely be in their prayer corner anyway, rather than, acting out or putting themselves in that kind of position. But the Bible is letting us know that the request comes to Jesus. It comes to you, the hedge. It says Satan has asked for you so that he may sift you as wheat. Because take a look at a situation where someone tells you, get thee behind me, Satan. He didn't say, get thee behind me, you are a bad person, or I don't like you right now, you are just upsetting me. No. He says, get thee behind me, Satan. Who will not be offended by that? Who will not be upset by that? There were too many reasons, too many counts on which the people, the disciples could have been offended, or different things, maybe, things happening in their home, or they're calling you at home, this father is sick, and all of so many things. But Jesus said, this request came to my desk. This request came to me. I opened the letter and I responded to that request. And what was his response? Intercession. Intercession. The reason I'm saying this is that many of the people who need this the most, they are the people who will not put themselves in that position where you can happily stand in the place of intercession for them. Is the truth. Many of the people who need it the most are the ones who will not put themselves in that position where you can do that for them. So if you even take a look at the example of Joseph in the house of Potiphar, if we're talking about this hedge system, it may have seemed to you that, Joseph was the servant. He was a slave. But I will have you know that Joseph was a hedge for Potiphar. So this is not about whether, he's a senior person or whatever. The hedge in a family might literally be the last born. The hedge in a family might be the most unseen, most invisible, most unheard person. So Joseph is in that house. Joseph is in that setup. And just looking at him, regular sight, he's a slave. But the reality is that he was a hedge, because the Bible records that Potiphar's household was blessed because of Joseph. That's what a hedge represents. That's what a hedge does. Simply because of Joseph's presence in that house, Potiphar's household was blessed. Because do you know how much prayer Joseph was running in that system? Because I guarantee there's no way that guy could have survived what he was dealing with in that situation without prayer. There's no way. And so part of the benefit of being in Potiphar's house when he was running that prayer was that Potiphar too was enjoying the prayer. He was enjoying the fruits of the prayer. Because is Joseph going to now be blessed in a strange place? No. So Potiphar's house is maximally blessed. Why? Because Joseph is there. He's running prayer chains, running prayer cycles, running prayer marathons. So don't think that being a hedge or being the covering for someone is that, oh, you are the leader of it. No. Many times the hedge is the person that you can't even see. Because the hedge is God's strategy. That is the role that the hedge plays of intercession. It's God's strategy of recovery, protection, and preservation for his people. That's what happens. So even with Mary and Joseph, these were probably some of the most unnoticed people in their time. Because do you not think that if it was maybe the chief intercessor of the land, maybe the enemy would have kept his eye on her? Like, I don't know what's going on here, but let me keep my... No, these were they were just random people. Nobody really talked about where they came from, their father's house. They were very random people. But they functioned as a hedge around Jesus. They functioned as a hedge around Jesus. The reason I say that is because when we say things like this, somebody might think it's because, maybe as a leader. No. In your family where you are right now, darkness has prevailed. Darkness has run things for too long. And the reason you are here listening to this, the reason you are part of this ministry is because God has decided that, it is enough. And I'm going to put a hedge in place. That's why you're here. That's why you are being taught about intercession, because you are that hedge. You don't need a platform. You don't need anything. You don't need to be seen. You don't need to be known, but you are that hedge that your family is depending on if they are going to break out of darkness. And that's why I said many times, the people that you are even interceding for in the family, they will still be the ones upsetting. They will still be the ones getting on your nerve. I tell you this. I've experienced it too many times. You are interceding for someone. You are standing in the place of prayer. Next thing, that same person, and there will be a family member, I'm telling you, that same person will be the one to get on your nerve. That same person will be the one to say something, do something that makes you just be like, you know what? Good for you. Whatever comes out of your life, whatever happens with you, you are on your own. And many of us have been in that situation where you're like, you know what? I wash my hands of this person's matter. I'm not doing anymore because they don't seem to get it. They'll be like, I'm out. Because it's that annoying. You are laboring in the place of prayer, and then these people are, acting in this way. They are behaving any kind of way. But Jesus is letting us know that there is a clear pattern. There is a clear system that he puts in place. And that's why at the end of what he told Peter, he said, I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. And he said, and when thou art strengthened, right? No, what did he say? Yeah, when thou art converted, right? When thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. So he's basically telling him, knowing that he's going to occupy that position, in the body of Christ after he's departed. He's telling him, this is a system. I'm showing you a system. Okay? You on your own, you cannot sustain yourself. The enemy has made multiple requests for you, but I keep turning it down. And the way that I turn it down is that I prayed for you. That's the way he turned it down. It's not a yes or no question. It's a question of intercession. The only answer to that question is intercession. So Jesus is telling him that I have prayed for you. And then when you are standing, when you are solid, because you will recover. It might feel turbulent for a minute, but you will recover. Right? And he's saying that when you are fine, when you are standing, do the same thing for your brethren. Why? Because it will always happen. As long as this is a relationship between humans, as long as this is the transaction, this is something that is happening between humans, this will always happen. Someone will always be offended by you. You will always be offended by someone. It's just going to happen. So you get over that really quick and understand that this is a template from the kingdom, and this is how we address it. So before you go off getting upset, before you go off, saying, oh, this and that, he's saying your first response is to intercede for the person. Because more than likely, if you don't mount that position of intercession, that person will indeed be sifted as wheat, as the enemy intended. He will be sifted. That's why I gave the example of Job. If that hedge is taken up, then the enemy has a field day. Whatever he wants to do, it's a free-for-all. That's why many times in the body of Christ, people talk about this concept and this idea of spiritual covering. Spiritual covering. And I know it's been abused, and many of us don't like to hear. If we don't hear anything like "call," we're out, because we don't like the idea of the whole spiritual covering thing. Because I do agree that many times it's been abused. So in some cases, it's been used as a means to exert undue authority, undue power, whatever the situation may be on people. But understand that even though man perverts something, it doesn't change the fact that this is something that God put in place. Even though man takes the prophetic and perverts it, it does not mean that that is not something God put in place. Because the enemy does not create anything anyway. All he can do is come and mess with something that's already created. So the system of covering is one that was put in place for this very reason, for this very purpose. There are many people that what they are running on is the prayers that somebody else is praying for them. They may never realize it. They might be walking around in their own pride and strength, like, oh, I'm all of this and I'm all of that. But they may never know that the reason they are standing, the reason that business is prospering, is because you are standing in that place of intercession. They may never know. So when the enemy tries to strike people, we as the people who are intercessors have to be on high alert. We have to be alert. Because people, who are being attacked, the funny thing is, usually, the person who is being attacked is normally the last person to know. So Satan knows he's on an attack mission. You are watching the person, Because you know what happens sometimes is that the enemy will actually, or rather, God will show you before that thing even happens. God will show you before that thing even happens. And it was recently I finally got the chance to put notes together and understand this is what happened, because it was not the first time it had happened and it wasn't the second time, but I was like, now I can see the pattern. Because if you are in that position, whether in a family, in a friendship, in a work relationship, whatever that situation is, many times, you will be put on alert. Either you would see it happen or you would sense that something is brewing in the spirit. But your response matters in that moment. Your response matters in that moment. What is the best time to take care of this before the thing actually, turns into a big thing? It's at the point in time where you are told about it. It's at the point in time where the Spirit of God reveals it to you. Many times, that person's face might just start flashing before you. Maybe you just start thinking of the person more than usual. Maybe you just start, I don't know, you go to pray, that person's name keeps coming up for you. That's the time you pray for them. Because many times it's that the enemy is trying to do something around them. He's trying to sift them. I like how the Bible puts some things. Trying to sift you. Right. Because that's literally what the enemy does for many people. Just sift people randomly. So it becomes your responsibility to stand in the gap for those people. It becomes your responsibility to pray for those people, because that's the only response that is required of you. And sometimes, like I said, it wouldn't feel good. People are people, and people, they're going to do what they're going to do, right? But this is your responsibility. You have to know this, especially as a marketplace minister, especially as a leader, because like I said, you being a marketplace minister means that you stand in a position of spiritual leadership in that space, in that complex, in that office, right? Wherever it is that you function, whether in a business or a 9-to-5, being a marketplace minister puts you in a position of spiritual leadership. So like Joseph, his ID card read slave, but in the spirit, he was in charge of that household. You don't go by what your title is or your position is on earth. If you are in that work environment, if you're in that building and there are unbelievers there, if you're in that family and there are people who do not know God, your position by, rank or the number of kids in that family, you might be the last one, the one nobody listens to, the one they slap around, because out of 10 kids, you are the last. That may be your position, but understand that in the spirit, that's not your position. And when you are judged, when you are questioned in the spirit, they're not going to question you based on being the last born. They're not going to question you based on being the front desk person. They're not going to question you based on being, just a junior analyst. They're not going to question you based on that. They're going to question you based on your spiritual identity. They're going to question you based on your spiritual identity. Because first and foremost, as a believer, you are called to intercession. So many of us like to think that some people have a special calling for intercession, in that it's you people they call to be praying. The rest of us just leave us alone. You know what? I will just give you an update. So you answered a call for salvation, but indeed you signed up as an intercessor. Because there are too many people that are too far from God. There are too many people that are far from the knowledge of God. And like I mentioned earlier, the hedge, the intercession, is God's system of recovery, protection, and preservation. So that's why you'll find situations, like in Ezekiel, where God will say, well, I sought for a man that will make up the hedge, that would stand in the gap. Why does God want that? Because even though these people have upset him to max, it's still not his desire that they be destroyed. So anybody who takes up their responsibility as a believer, understand that the ID card you have here on earth is not how they are badging you in heaven. The ID card they are using to badge you in heaven is the ID card of an intercessor. It said, I looked for a man who could make up the hedge and stand in the gap from among them. That them may be your family, that them may be your workplace, that them may be your fellowship, that them may be anything. But not today that God is looking to you to be his reason to step in, to be his reason to intervene, and even more importantly, to be the hedge that blocks the enemy out. There are too many people on a very critical journey of deliverance, because deliverance is not always a one-time process where someone lays a hand on you and you fall down. Sometimes deliverance is a journey. Deliverance is a journey. And so many times people are on that journey. And when you don't realize it, you may not know how to help them. Many people are on that journey and it's turbulent sometimes. So they might act out. And if you don't have that spiritual intelligence that I'm trying to communicate to you today, you respond to them the way that they're acting. And at the end of the day, they end up being sifted. Then their cycle starts again. But I'm crying out to us today that wherever you occupy, as an intercessor, as a believer, as a marketplace minister, God is counting on you as a system through which he can draw more souls into the kingdom. Why? Because you chose to stand and intercede. Because you chose to stand and intercede. That's all that is asked of you. So some of us might be like, but people are badly behaved. It's not today people have started being badly behaved. It's not today. Even God said that, you know what, I repent that I made man, because my heart is grieved. In that, had I known, I should not have made this creature. Do you understand that? People will always be that way. But we cannot allow people's behavior determine how we administer our duties. Because understand that if you ever answer the call of salvation, you have a few moments to settle into this new house, this house being the kingdom. You have a few moments to just, hang your things and, put your boxes away, because they are waiting for you in the intercession line. They are waiting for you there. So you get a few minutes to grab a snack, drink something, put your bags away or whatever. But the moment you're done, okay, off to the intercession line. That's where you go. Somebody was saying that, they wish that when people give their life to Christ, that they gave enough disclaimers that just so you know, you are signing up for warfare, you are enlisting for warfare. Because many of us don't want that. We don't want that. If we knew it was warfare, we'd probably stay outside, even though that's never the right response anyway, because whether you stay outside or in, you're still in warfare. So you can either be fighting on the Lord's side, or you can be the enemies that God will come and scatter when he arises, right? So the moment you take up this identity as a believer, know that you have been called to the position of intercession. So you're in these spaces with these people, and they are depending on you fulfilling your duties in order to stand. They are depending on you showing up at your post in order for them to stand. So look at Abraham and Lot. I really wonder how many times Abraham had to go bail Lot out. Do you realize that while Lot and Abraham were still running things together and, living and just, doing their things peacefully, nobody heard anything about any kings coming to carry anybody? But once Lot realized that, Esau has arrived now, look at all these animals. I know this work. I know this business. Nobody should be telling me any kind of thing. Is it because you are my uncle that brought me from the village to the city? Is it because of that you want to start telling me how to do? I'm a grown man, And Abraham, you see, that man is a peaceful man. Say, you know what, let's not fight. Take your things. You see that choose. If you even say where we're standing now, you want to take it, I will pack my load for you. Do you understand? He said choose. But you see, it was after that Abraham, that was living as a peaceful man, had to become a warrior. He had to become a warrior. We know at least 2 incidents when Abraham had to step in to save that man from captivity. Abraham continued to play his role of intercession. And as much as we talk about Lot, in my quiet times, when I think about that relationship between Abraham and Lot, and this is just me, and I could be very off base and I could be wrong, but I'd like to think that they somehow managed to maintain a modicum of a healthy relationship. Because now you see that these kings, come and attack, Sodom and Gomorrah, and they pack Lot and all of his things and all of that. And Abraham gathers all of his men and they're like, and let's go. You know what Abraham is doing in that moment? Whether he was in the place of peace with Lot or maybe Lot was still getting on his nerves or whatever, he showed up. That is intercession. That's warfare. So Lot has annoyed him. Lot chose the best land, as though go and sort yourself out. That means that if there was no other land for Abraham, Lot didn't even care. The Bible records that he looked around. He looked for the lushest piece of land, the best of the best, and he chose it. Basically, Abraham, figure yourself out. Like, do you? And this is somebody who brought him out of their village. This is somebody who set him up in business. But he chose the best of the best. Abraham didn't even mind. But you see, when they carried Lot, it's still Abraham that stood up to go and fight for Lot. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. This is the position you occupy. You are called to a life of intercession. You can be mad at people all day, but you cannot remove your identity from yourself. You cannot vacate your duty post simply because you're mad at people. So he may have been upset or whatever, but we always say and describe how like a lot of the Old Testament gives us like types and shadows and gives us like, like graphic, basically acting things out. That was intercessional. Gathering his army and going to fight for him and then restoring him back to where he was supposed to be. And that was not the last time. This is what I'm saying. When people, decide that like, oh, I'm going to fight with the person who is basically standing as my covering, standing as my hedge, you fall into that situation where they're having to come save you from one thing to the next because you have no hedge. So people have to, okay, let's say that's what was happening with Lot. With Lot. And so eventually, this time, it was even God that was coming to destroy a place. It was still Abraham. It was still Abraham who interceded for him. He didn't say, you know what, I don't know about that guy because, his behavior is very soft. He was still the one that was interceding for him. Look at him negotiating with God. He didn't even know if God would get angry with those negotiations, but he stood there, he kept negotiating. He said, don't be angry. Please, forgive me. I know I'm pushing it, but if you find this, if you find 20, he kept doing that for Lot. That's what it means to embrace your position, embrace your identity as an intercessor. That is a duty God calls you to, not one you perform based on people's behavior, not one you perform whether you feel like it or not. That's a duty God holds you accountable for. That's it. So if you have these kinds of people in your family, you have these kinds of people in your lives, your relationship, whatever, your duty is to stand in intercession for them, especially when you see the enemy trying to sift them by causing that rift. Next thing they start acting out, you better stand in the place of intercession. You better stand. Because they barely have the capacity to discern what's going on with them, much less that they are being attacked. Remember, I said many times, the person that is under attack, that's the last to know. Everybody around there will be able to, this person is clearly under attack, but they will swear that nothing is wrong with them. I know somebody right now. I know somebody, and I'm not even saying that to be funny because it's actually a very painful situation, right? I know somebody who's under clear attack, but they insist that nothing is wrong. And everybody is there like, okay, we're going to try to help you, but they swear nothing is wrong with them. They swear they are completely fine. And that's how it happens many times. So when you sit with these people and say, okay, what's going on with you and this your best friend? What's going on with you? You know what? Don't talk to me about, because, you know what? Is it because? I've seen this thing play out. It is a very crafty strategy of the enemy. Suddenly you realize there's a reason for you to be upset. Suddenly you realize there's a reason for you to fight. Suddenly you realize there's a reason for you to start misbehaving. And you won't even know that that's what's going on. Well, I'm telling you, even though I'm speaking to the intercessors, if you find yourself in a situation where you're navigating a season of deliverance, if you find yourself navigating this season of your life, please keep an eye out for your own self as well. People can only do so much for you. So keep an eye out for yourself as well. When you see yourself behaving in a way that you're like, wait, why am I, like, how did we get here? How did I get here? If you find yourself suddenly in that space, you help yourself. People will help you, but help yourself. Help yourself. So, like I said, it's not your duty to determine how people respond to it. Because at the end of the day, Judas will always be Judas. There's a part of scripture I want to read for us because I think it'll bless you a lot to see this. It touched my heart very deeply when I read it. Let me find it for you. Good. People will do the best they can for you, but you have a duty to also look out for yourself. Because at the end of the day, Lot's wife will always be Lot's wife. Judas will always be Judas. I'm telling you so that you don't think, so it's the people that are interceding for me that at the end of the day, you do your part as the intercessor. Because it's kind of like a situation where the matter gets tabled before God, where it's like, okay, let's judge this matter. Let's judge this case. Each person will be given their own questions. So you who was supposed to be under covering and decided to act out, they will still ask you questions. But you who was supposed to be a hedge for this person and did not respond in intercession, you will answer for it as well. You will. I know we want to be like, you know what? I don't care. I'm telling you, you will answer for it. That's why Jesus did what he did. Because he would have to answer for it. And I will show you where he answered for it. I will show you. If you look at John chapter 17, I'm going to read from verse 6. I'm going to read from verse 6 as I bring the teaching to a close. It says here, it says, I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me out of the world. Thine they were, and thou gavest them me, and they have kept thy word. Do you see what Jesus is saying? The whole world is not yours to save. So you just get that and you have peace. He said, the ones that you gave me out of the world, in this whole world of people, know this today, that there are people that God will hold you responsible for. That's the truth. There are people that God will hold you responsible for. Whether they are in your family, whether they're in your place of work, whether they are a friend, there are people that God will hold you responsible for. So he said, I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me out of the world. Thine they were, and thou gavest them me, and they have kept thy word. It says, now they have known that all things whatsoever thou givest me are of thee. I want to jump actually to verse 9. If you are following the message, I want to know you are still here. This one that I've silenced the line, I can't hear anybody, so I want to know that you're still here. Verse 9 is powerful. Verse 9 is powerful. He says, I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine. These people might offend God. These people might upset God. But guess what? God's heart bleeds for them and the pain that they are going through. So when he places them in your care and you neglect to do your duty of interceding for them, God will hold you responsible for them as well. So you have to get over people's bad behavior. You do have to. You basically have to. If Abraham could get over Lot's bad behavior, you can get over people's bad behavior. You get over people's bad behavior and you intercede for them. Don't forget, you are not responsible to force their own response, though. But your own duty, when they table it and they are asking people, you at least can answer properly that I interceded. They can, that person will get their judgments, from God. But you make sure that you don't get your own judgment from God by not interceding. God will hold you responsible for them. He says, I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me. And all mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I'm glorified in them. You say, and now I'm no more in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to thee. Do you understand? He was still praying for them, say, I'm leaving, but I need you to take care of this man. I've done my own. Verse 12 is where I want us to see. It says, while I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me, I kept them, and none of them is lost. None of them is lost, but the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. So if God were to just run a random audit on your duties right now as an intercessor, would you be able to respond the same way that Jesus responded? By saying, all of the ones that you gave me, I have kept them, and none of them is lost. You are not responsible to change Judas's heart. That's God's work. Okay? So that's why I said Judas will remain Judas. Lot's wife will be Lot's wife. I don't even know why they didn't put her name in there. It was really that bad, huh? So that's how it's going to be. That's how it's going to be. But you have your own duty that you must play, which is intercession. And this is what Jesus is saying. That even though one of them was a son of perdition, I made sure that I kept all of them as much as I could, as long as I could. I'm telling you that if Jesus had his way, he would have changed Judas's story. If he had his way, he would have changed Judas's story. And you have to realize that that script that Judas played, it did not have his name on it from heaven. I don't believe so. Somebody was supposed to act that position out. And I don't want to share much here. It's basically that the spirit was roaming around, finding who it could find compatibility with. The spirit is just roaming around. It's just lurking around, finding where it can find compatibility. And it happened to be Judas. It happened to be Judas. It didn't have to be him, but it happened to be him. So I'm saying this right now because the power of your intercession is real. The impact of your intercession is real. It really matters. It really makes a difference. But you must show up and do it. We may not like people, the way they behave to us. We may not like the way they treat us, but we must show up and do this because God will hold us responsible. God will hold us accountable. I want to round up shortly, but I want us to just hear this again. A few things, because I want to just tie this up before we pray. Many times when God is doing something in someone's life, the enemy may not show up initially. The enemy may not show up even in the middle. The enemy may not even show up 75% of the way through. It's at that 90% mark where it becomes clear to the enemy that this person will really break out for good. And at that point, I can no more have any control or say in this person's life and story. It is at that point that he looks to stir the waters. He looks to stir the waters in some of these relationships. He looks for where that hedge is. And when he finds the hedge, he looks to tamper with it. The first part of this message I taught had to do with you when you're in that position and you find that the enemy is truly trying to sift you as wheat. But the second part is where I wanted to really sit. That as a believer, you are called to intercession. Whether you have a title, whether you have a platform, or whatever the case may be, you are called to intercession. Once you took up the name of Christ upon yourself, you were called to intercession. And God will hold you accountable for those he put in your care if you do not intercede for them. There may be 2, there may be 10, there may be 50, there may be 100. But however many people God has put in your care, you have a responsibility to intercede for them. If not, the enemy will sift them and God will look at you and ask why. I hope someone has been blessed today. I hope that someone has heard something today that would, indeed, I would say impact the way that you go about your duties as a Christian. I hope that you have heard something today that shows you what your position is, what your duty is. It's not about rank. It's not about title. It's really about your call as a believer. It's the base call. We don't shift this to some people and say, oh, they are called. There are people who that's the ministry they're going to offer in the body of Christ. But every single one of us, this is what we're called to. So you intercede for that uncle, you intercede for that aunt, you intercede for that mother, you intercede for that cousin, you intercede for that colleague. Okay? You intercede for all of them. Because if you don't, God will hold you responsible for it. I hope that we all have been blessed today. And I'm gonna hand over to, I think it's Victoria, or I don't know.